The Drink by Jim Davies. On the deck of the ship, Brenda found a handsome guy named Phil, but only a few minutes into the conversation, he started to look too appetizing for her to concentrate. If you listen to the lyrics, I mean, if you read them, he was talking about some band. They're just so cryptic and just profound. She found his enthusiasm infectious, but not enough to actually go and listen to it. I've heard they're good. It was a lame response. She could not keep her mind on the conversation, what with the smell of his blood beneath his skin. A.B., she was pretty sure. She heard his heartbeat, or at least she thought she could hear it. It was faint, dreamlike. Could she actually be hearing his heartbeat? His hair was long and a bit of it was caught on his eyelash. Every time he blinked, she watched, hoped it would break loose. Blink. Nope. Phil was oblivious, like some people are when eating cereal with a drop of milk on their lip. Gotta check their latest album. Amazing. He was talking again. What had she missed? Didn't matter. She glanced around. They were alone on the deck. She went for his throat. She approached and his eyes widened. Must have thought she was making a pass at him. He even stepped back, but she took him by the arms and leaned her head in. He turned his lips to hers, but she opened her mouth and put it on the side of his throat, fangs extending. Get it right, Brenda. You'd think with a degree in biology she'd have no problem getting the right carotid, but she'd botched it yesterday, leaving somebody screaming with almost no blood flow. So much for a state school education. Phil tensed as her fangs went in, and a small moan escaped his lips. Then he said, ow. The blood started to enter her mouth. Yum. Definitely AB. Nothing like warm, living blood cells to make you feel like you're not dead. Ow, he said, louder, and then pushed her hard. Brenda was stronger than when she'd been alive, but turned out still not as strong as Phil. Her grip with her teeth and hands came loose, tearing the skin of his neck. She tried to retract her fangs before he saw them, but oh, the smell of blood was everywhere now, and she was still a bit lost in a drinking reverie. The hell? Phil said, and tried to stop the glorious bleeding with his hand. Shit. Brenda had only been a vampire a few days before she'd gone on this stupid night cruise. Ted had told her not to do it. She'd insisted it would be fun, and here she was, realizing that it was a pretty stupid idea after all. Now Phil's eyes widened as his mind tried to make sense of the vampire in front of him. Not good. She lunged at him, but he must have taken judo or something because he got her into some kind of a throw. She landed hard on her back before she knew what was happening to her. Now it was her turn. Ow! No more Ms. Nice Vampire. She sprang up, noting, thankfully, that you can't get the wind knocked out of you if you don't breathe. She reached for him. They grappled briefly, and she found herself thrown again in the air. More air? In the ocean. Whenever Brenda had imagined falling off of a medium-sized cruise ship at night, it seemed really scary. Falling about 10 feet and landing hard onto dark, cold water, and then being under in her clothing, not being able to breathe, freezing, totally disoriented. Now that it was really happening, she felt most of these things, but came to her senses rather more quickly because, as a vampire, the cold wasn't so bad, nor the fall, nor the inability to breathe. Aside from talking, she hadn't breathed since she died. When was that? Tuesday? It was only Saturday. She learned to swim when she was alive, so she kicked off her heels and swam to the surface. The ship was already at least 50 feet away and disappearing rapidly into the darkness. She tried for a minute to swim after it, but it was clearly too fast and looked to be half a mile away in no time. Fuck. She turned around and saw the land behind her. It looked to be a few miles away, but she also knew that distances looked different on the water. She started swimming back to shore. She felt her clothes were slowing her down, and she thought of taking them off, but didn't want to be naked when she got out. 2 hours of swimming, the land seemed no closer. She was tired, but not out of breath. It was pure muscle ache. Did vampires have lactic acid buildup? Felt like it. The night was so silent. She took a break and began to sink. What limited air she had in her lungs kept her quasi-buoyant, but not like a living body. Most of all, she was hungry. Very hungry. She'd already been hungry when she'd lunged for that black belt Phil and only got the tiniest bit of his blood. Very unsatisfying, like taking a single bite of a hot fudge sundae, her favorite food. Or was. Didn't sound very good now. Ted said food would make her vomit. She'd been bulimic when she was 16. Didn't want to start that shit again. She kept swimming. She sang songs to herself just for something to do, and that killed a few hours. Turns out her catalog was shorter than she'd expected, and by the time she was singing Happy Birthday to You, she was bored out of her mind, and the land only looked a little closer. What was more unsettling? That the sky was getting lighter, or her buoyancy, or lack of it? She hadn't felt sunlight since she was alive, but according to Ted, it caused her skin to burst into flame. How does it feel? She'd asked. Like you burst into flame. Ah. When she paused, took a break, she ever so slowly began to sink, the deep, unknown dark beneath calling to her. It started to look like dawn would arrive before she got to land. Brenda panicked, thrashing about and screaming into the empty morning. After a few minutes, she calmed herself. She licked the salt water off her lips and smoothed her hair. God, she was hungry. If she dove submerged, could she suck the blood of a fish? She poked her head under the water and could barely see anything. Not that she thought she'd be able to catch one. As a vampire, she was fast, but not fish in water fast. She swam down as far as she could, but did not reach bottom, and frankly, it was scary down there. She wanted to just lie on the bottom and sleep the day away. She coveted what little air she held in her lungs, at least a neutral buoyancy. Hungry and feeling like a complete idiot, she swam faster toward shore. The sun was coming up and she'd never been so anxious in her life. When dawn finally broke, a gentle, lovely ray of sunlight played upon her head. It seared her cheek. Her forehead caught fire, then her eyelids. The pain was enormous. All this happened in the second it took her to get her head below water. The salt water stung, but ultimately made her head feel better. She could not close her left eye because of a missing eyelid. Very disturbing, but thank God things like this hurt less when you're undead. She felt herself exerting a rather lot of energy just to stay buoyant. Now, with her head completely submerged, she kept swimming in what she was pretty sure was the direction of land. She didn't dare come up for a peek, though. She used the sun's location as a guide. But should she? Maybe she should dive, sink away from the sun, into the inky blackness below? The other unfortunate consequence of the sunrise was that the top several feet of ocean was getting brighter and slowly burning her skin. She found she was getting a bad sunburn even underwater. She swam deeper, but had to swim at a downward angle to stay low enough and keep moving toward shore. The deep dark called to her, its voice both tantalizing and terrifying. She recalled playing in the pool as a child and how hard it was to sink an air-filled ball. The farther down you tried to press it, the harder it wanted to come up. Great. But she didn't need to breathe. Lungs full, lungs empty, matter little. She could dive to the beckoning depths, simply exhale, giving up what little dead breath remained. Now she wanted to swim completely under the water. After an hour, she realized that she had to swim deeper and deeper as the sun rose and the light penetrated farther down. She didn't need to breathe, but her old instincts were still there, putting her mind in a state of near panic. The deep, dark beckoned. At one point, Brenda was so exhausted she just stopped swimming just for a moment to rest. She must have been closer to shore now, she figured, and as such, the water must not have been as deep. She tried again to swim to the bottom. Maybe there would be something there she could hold on to. She could scarcely see her hands in front of her, and soon they were ghostly blue shapes as she went down and down. Her hands hit sand and then struggled along the bottom, looking for some seaweed or something to hold on to. Think, Brenda. She dug into the sand and tried to bury herself. Exhausted now, she used her last surge of adrenaline to scoop the ocean bottom. Some of the sand covered her, but its weight wasn't enough to hold her down. She knew she had to exhale. Then, in the corner of her eye, she spotted something darker. She swam to it and felt a large rock. She wrapped her arms around it and held tight. The grip took strength, but not as much as swimming did. She tried to calm down, but the only tool in her toolbox was deep breathing, which wasn't an option for many reasons. She counted down from 100, then again. When could she safely go back to the surface? She looked up and saw blackness. If she could hold on longer, but her energy was long gone. A thought bubbled up from the depths of her mind, a desperate thought. The weariness in her arms fully entered her consciousness. As she relaxed her grip, ever so briefly resting again, her body began to float upwards towards what she now knew must be the blistering light of day. She exhaled, purging the final remains of any oxygen in her lungs, emptying them completely, allowing the dark ocean water to fill them, any hope of her buoyancy gone. Her undying body settled to the ocean floor, the crushing pressure of the depth like a soothing blanket of darkness. Famished, crying, her hope faded as the ocean above her brightened. Her fear of the unknown above outweighed her fear of the deep darkness.